Did it change over stuff?
Do you want to turn off?
No, it's okay.
Testing, testing. Okay.
Hello, everyone. The board will now convene open session and report out from closed session. Live streaming on YouTube will begin now for the open session of the Board of Education meeting. The URL for YouTube live streaming may be found on the NHUSD Board of Education webpage just before the meeting begins at 6:30 p.m. If you are joining us online via the Zoom webinar and you would like to provide public comment for this meeting, you may do so by utilizing the raise your hand option in Zoom. Or if you are calling in by phone, please press *9 and wait to be called on. Community members may still provide public comments to the board prior to each meeting via email at publiccomment@nhusd.k12.ca.us. There were no comments provided to the board for tonight's meeting via public comment email address. I would like to remind the public that we will not be responding to questions posed by those making public comments. Relative to closed session items number 3.1 through 3.4, there was no action taken by the board. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have roll call, please?
Alvaro.
Here.
Candace.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Ishihira.
Here.
Mallory.
Here.
Chima.
All right. The next item on our agenda is item 5.3, approval of the agenda. May I have a motion and second to approve tonight's agenda? So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Calderon. Aye. Campbell.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Mckelly.
Aye. Now we're on item 5.4, land acknowledgement. Trustee Gonzalez, will you read the land acknowledgement tonight?
Sure. We want to open up this meeting by acknowledging with respect and love that the land we are on today is the traditional ancestral homeland of the Ohlone Chochenyo First People. We recognize and thank the Ohlone people as the original stewards of this land. Indigenous people must not be spoken about in the past context as if they left on their own accord when the real causes were white supremacy, manifest destiny, and U.S. colonization. By recognizing we stand on the occupied indigenous territory of the Ohlone people, we recommit ourselves to listen to Native leadership and stand in solidarity with people struggling against systems of oppression throughout the world, past and present.
Thank you. We are on item 6.1. This is hearing of visitors on topics that are not on the agenda. Do you have any speakers? And to remind you, if you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand or press *9. If you're in person, you can submit a blue card.
We do not have any speakers for non-agenda items.
Okay. The second item is 7.1. These are speakers for items that are on the agenda. Again, you can submit a blue card. If you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand, and or if you're on the phone, you can press *9. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes. Do we have any speakers for items on the agenda?
We do. We have one speaker speaking on to item 10.2, and that's Frank Snelling.
Good evening, board members and the community. Kalani, good to see you. Former student of mine. It's great to see you. Congratulations. My name is Greg Snelling. I'm a 25th year teacher all at Alvarado Elementary School. And as a member of the New Haven Teachers Association bargaining team, it's my privilege to represent more than 530 hardworking members of NHTA who are so dedicated to the development and success of the children we serve. Tonight, as an informational item on your agenda, is an HTA sunshine proposal. This is the formal beginning of the process of bargaining a successor agreement with the certificated staff here in New Haven. Negotiations in New Haven have been stressful and contentious nearly my entire career here in New Haven. I remember leading a chant here, like the third year, no healthcare takeaway accepted. And it was beyond raucous. I didn't know what else to say. And of course, that culminated with the strike in 2019. Since last May, we reached agreement on modest increases to salary and some contract issues important to NHTA staff. We found agreement on pandemic-related concerns via MOUs. I'm hopeful that the productive negotiations and discussions that we have had will continue, even as we steer towards the work of creating smaller class sizes for students and agreeing to a fair and respectable salary increase that appropriately recognizes the work done by the teachers, counselors, psychologists, speech therapists, and nurses in New Haven. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any speakers on Zoom?
We do have one speaker, Jeff White, Angeles.
Okay, Mr. Angelos.
Good evening, Clerk Trustee Shu Mallory, trustees of the board, student reps, Dr. Thompson, district staff, teachers and staff in the gallery and at home. Thank you for your time tonight. I did want to share a couple comments, so please give me some indulgence. The two items I'm speaking about is 10.2 and 12.6. Both of them have been already kind of reflected by Mr. Snelling, but I did want to say on the successor agreement, I find it very much a pleasure to bring this conversation back because as you know, great Mr. Snelling mentioned how difficult it was in 2019 when the two sides have no real common ground in conversation. That new conversation that Mr. Snelling mentioned did have some great things that came out of that conversation and contract. 4 items in particular, a compensation, a recognition of our work in the pandemic area, as well as a collapse of the salary. And then of course, big one that we all want, the first step in class size reduction. We're looking forward to continue that conversation on class size reduction as we move forward next month. That to say that movement that we had that we just mentioned leads us to the 12.6, which is the MOU. And that goes back to what Mr. Stelling mentioned. The difficult conversation in 2019 was about just a recognition of value, expertise, and worth of teachers. We know, unfortunately, they already mentioned in your board briefs that the sub shortage is incredible. And since August, the teachers at every site have been stepping up to cover that shortage in that kind of time to give, help for the cause. And the MOU that we came out of real productive, collaborative conversation recognizes that event by our teachers, by our staff, to help out the cause by giving up their own time that again is at their volunteer consideration, but an enhancement of some of the area of compensation was very much appreciated and hope that you will approve it tonight. I did want to say again, I'm looking forward to our conversation this year. With these things in mind, the past contract as well as the MOUs this year really is an example of a respected and open conversation between both the district and New Haven Teachers Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers? All right, with that, we will move on to section number 8. Item 8.1 is 2020-2021 Division of Teaching and Learning Annual Student Achievement Update with Mr. Kazani.
First time we need these. Good evening, Clerk Swin Mallory, members of the board, Superintendent Thompson, and members of the community. My name is Scott Kazani, and I serve as the Chief Academic Officer for the New Haven Unified School District. Tonight, we'll be presenting our 2020-2021 Student Achievement Update. This presentation will provide a wealth of information from a variety of lenses. As part of our presentation, we've included supporting documents that are linked and are available for your review. Any text that is bold and underlined is an active link to this information, and it includes comprehensive information and details which may answer many of your questions. We're very excited and pleased to be with all of you this evening. In 2021-2022, we engaged in the first year of implementing our district's strategic plan. The New Haven Unified School District Board of Education adopted 5 goals to support our strategic plan. Goal number 1, college, career, and life readiness. Goal number 2, equity, access, and achievement. Goal number 3, effective employee relations and a collaborative district culture. Goal number 4, community outreach, engagement, and advocacy. And goal number 5, effective resource and operational sustainability. From the board to the district, to our school sites, to our classrooms, to our students, we've been working to build coherence and alignment in our system. In 2020-2021, in order to build this coherence and alignment within the Division of Teaching and Learning, we engaged in reorganization. On the left, there is a link to the current organizational flowchart, which graphically represents the division. And on the right is a link to the roles and responsibilities. It's a resource that delineates who is responsible for what and provides information as to the scope of work for each of the members of the Division of Teaching and Learning. And with that, I'd like to introduce Lee Stevens, the Director of K-12 Instruction.
Thank you. Good evening. In New Haven, we serve a diverse community of learners. For our last language census, over 50 languages were represented in our district, and 19% of our students were identified as English learners. Our English learners take the Language Proficiency Assessment, the LPAC, annually. Though we don't have growth data to show you tonight due to a pause on the LPAC assessment in 2020, we do have performance data to share that's linked for you from spring of 2021. We managed to test over 93% of our English learners during distance learning. I would say this was a huge highlight for us, and we attribute this success to the partnership of our families, as well as the efforts of our school staff. As a result, 50% of our students performed in the top 2 proficiency LPAC ranges, and 233 students were re-designated from English learner to English proficient learners status. So last year, we expanded our dual immersion Mandarin program by launching that at Guy Emanuel Elementary. Our dual immersion program aligns to the Global California 2030 initiative, which charged school districts calling for half of our students to be enrolled in a program that promotes language in more than one language by the year 2030. Along with all the benefits such as cross-cultural appreciation, acceleration of language proficiency for our English learners, we also recognize that this program helps retain as well as attract families into New Haven. As of last year, we welcomed 33 new families to New Haven, and we have a total of 207 students enrolled at last school year. And of those students, 35% were English learners. Sealed by Literacy. The Sealed by Literacy Award recognized students that will demonstrate a high level of proficiency in a language in addition to English. The gold seal is received from CDE, California Department of Ed, and is affixed either to the diploma or the student transcript upon high school completion. We were able to award 58 students with a seal this past school year. Now I'd like to turn it over to Mckelly, Director of K-12 Instruction.
Thank you. 3 years ago, our district started doing professional development around multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS. Multi-tiered systems of support allow us to look at the systems and structures that we have in place at our school sites and in our district. As a site principal, I can look at my leadership teams, my teacher pedagogy, the academic and behavior supports I have on my school site, parent engagement, how we're interacting with the community, and all of those things. Last year, we took a deeper dive into MTSS by working with a cohort of administrators, counselors, and our social worker, along with members of teaching and learning and people services. And on the left-hand side, you can see a sample of one of the professional developments we did. And on the right-hand side, all of that work that we did last year, we were able to come up with an MTS handbook around the systems and structures that we were going to be using this year. Next, one of the other things we studied 3 years ago is we studied a lot of professional development around UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. Universal Design for Learning asks us as teachers to take a proactive stance when it comes to designing the curriculum that we're doing in our classrooms. For example, we identify that all students come to our classrooms with a range of abilities and variabilities. As teachers, we are asked to look at our curriculum by designing targets, then identifying barriers that might get in the way of our students being successful, and then thinking of how to design our lessons around these 3 lenses of learning. One is multiple means of engagement, how to engage our students in our classroom. Multiple means of representation, how do I, as a teacher, present my curriculum to my students in a multiple variety of ways, and also multiple means of action expression. How do I have my students show me what they've learned and reflect on their own learning? On the left-hand side, you can see a UDL introduction to that I did for our elementary as well as our middle school principals. And on the left-hand side, right-hand side, you can see our UDL pattern, which is on our district. Another thing we did last year is for our kindergarten to be 5th grade, we started looking at a science curriculum for our elementary, and we started the adoption process. The wonderful thing about that is even though we're in distance learning, we had teachers from all 7 elementary school sites, PLA, as well as with Code School for Independent Study, and we were able to look at 11 different programs that we might adopt. We narrowed it down to 2. Linked to the slide is the social content review that we are asked to use whenever we're adopting curriculum. And finally, one of the things that we did last year is we created a family learning portal. The family learning portal was a direct result of all of the parent surveys that we did last year. We were able to put calendars, events, community resources, academic resources all on the portal. We are also able to offer a variety of workshops for our parents. All of those parent workshops are archived on this portal, and it is still up and running and live. So right now we are offering some parent workshops in the month of October, and that will be continuing to be done throughout the year. And now I'd like to turn it over to the Director of Digital Services, Don Mallow.
Thank you. About a year ago, October 2020, the board approved the Educational Services and Technology Reorganization. And that restructuring was intended to integrate technology services and educational services, as well as create a staff structure to support our communication efforts. This reorganization reads, I should turn the slide. This reorganization led to the addition of two people. Coming on in January of this year was our coordinator of assessment and evaluation, Jessica Ellenbarr. Ms. Ellenbarr supervises and supports all of the myriad of assessments that go on in the school district over the year, as well as support sites and district staff with seemingly unending data needs. The most recent addition to the Digital Services Department is our Communication Systems Specialist, Mr. Victor Guzman Benitez. Mr. Guzman Benitez is responsible for many key parts of our communication plan, including our social media and our website. When our new website ecosystem is kind of up and running, they'll also be supporting and managing our district website and supporting our school sites as well. A member of the department that did not change was our Director of Technology, Mr. Frank Delappole. Mr. Delappole oversees all our software, hardware, network, and as well as the technology department. In response to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, legislation was passed that suspends the use of the 2020 and 2021 dashboard for accountability purposes. Though the dashboard will not be the one-stop shop it used to be for housing all kind of academic and district data, that data will still be available on a number of the state's district portals. So the achievement and attendance and all that sort of stuff will still be available for folks that just won't be in that one dashboard. I did provide a link to the 2019 dashboard, which is the last dashboard that is fully comprehensive. If you were to look at the 2020 dashboard, you would find that it's essentially just a snapshot of our population counts of students and whatnot. And I expect, although the 2021 dashboard has not been released yet, when it is, it will look pretty much like 2020. So with that, I would like to introduce Jessica Ellenbarr, our Coordinator of Assessment and Evaluation.
Hello. Literally is the online reading assessment that we started using last year during our distance learning model. And at the end of trimester 1 in November, Literally scores showed that 50% of our students were reading at or above grade level. And of course, over the course of this school year, from fall to spring, students are expected to increase their reading level. And so the proficiency target they have to hit in spring is higher than it is in the fall. And at the end of trimester 3, we still had 50% of our students who were reading at or above grade level. And this indicates that in general, half of our students continue to grow throughout the year in our distance learning model, and we're able to meet the higher spring reading proficiency target. And of course, the gold link here at the bottom does also provide much more specific details on our Literally scores and assessment last year. The next assessment I wanted to talk about from last year is our NWEA assessment. Of course, NWEA has a much longer history here with us in New Haven. However, last year was the first time during distance learning that we administered it remotely. So that part was new. And just like Literally, from fall to spring, students are expected to grow each trimester with increasing targets that they have to hit in order to be considered proficient in the spring. And NWEA also sets a projected growth target for each student from fall to spring that particular student is expected to meet. And District-wide scores show that students started the year in August with scores that indicated high average skill levels, with the district mean in the 60th percentile range for both reading and math. In the spring, in May, our scores indicated an average skill level with the aggregate reading and math scores in the 40th percentile range. And overall, only 30 to 40% of our students met their growth targets from fall to spring. The change in overall skill level from high average or 60th percentile in the fall to average or 40th percentile in the spring can be attributed to the increasing proficiency targets that happen from fall to spring, as well as our low average growth. And again, just like for literally, the strengths and opportunities for growth that's in bold is a link that will provide more specific details and information about our NWEA assessments. Now I'd like to introduce Frank Delappole, our Director of Technology.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello, everyone. If you click on the gold link at the bottom of the technology slide, you can see highlights of what technology staff have been doing to support student achievement for the past year. All of us have been extremely busy, and we have had to drastically pivot from one change to another, and we have embraced a very agile mode of work. The bottom line for us has been that technology staff have been at the forefront of almost every organizational change and have supported all students, teachers, staff, and departments nonstop. Thank you. I'm very happy to turn this over to the great Sarah Kapler, Director of Special Services.
Good evening, members of the board. As we look at the outcomes for students in the Special Services Department, I have provided you with some basic enrollment information by student disability in the top left corner. As you can see, we are declining in enrollment, but not at the same pace as the rest of the district. As you've heard before, the gold link show this data for you to review. As we reviewed last year, we're very proud of the work that staff did in virtual learning. This has included over 28 sessions provided to our paraeducators, keeping up with our professional development for our special education staff, and we had record numbers of parents attending the Community Advisory Committee, which were held on Zoom. And last, as we look at accountability, you can find data on the California dashboard, as you heard the others mention, but also in our annual performance report. This includes 14 indicators that we have spoken about with this board before. The indicators for New Haven are focused on graduation rate, statewide assessments, preschool data, discipline, and the post-secondary outcomes. Some of those indicators include disproportionate outcomes for our students, and they're called out specifically in our C6 plan, which was provided to you in September. We have a general education plan that is focused on improving outcomes for our African-American students. And this plan is linked for you to review under the CSACE plan's significant disproportionality link. I would now like to introduce you to Marcus Lamb, our Director of Student and Family Services.
Good evening. During the 2020-2021 school year, we planned for the reorganization of centralized enrollment, pupil services, and the Union City Family Center to become one cohesive department to better serve our New Haven students, families, and community. This new Student and Family Services Department is located on the Barnard White campus. I've been given the opportunity to lead the Student and Family Services Department in collaboration with Blanca Snyder, our program specialist in centralized enrollment, Jennifer Hopkins, our Union City Family Center coordinator, and Abigail Coatzen, our coordinator of pupil services. During the 2020-2021 school year, we served 11,047 students, which is a decrease of 232 students. Unfortunately, this continued our pattern for declining enrollment, but the drop was less than previous years. Linked to the number to 11,047 is the demographic information for our student population as found on the California dashboard. We had 891 interdistrict transfers across New Haven last year, which is about 54 more students than we have in an average of the last 10 years. We also had 101 new interdistrict transfers, which is 2 less than the past 10-year average. Last year, we also introduced the new Personalized Learning Academy, which enrolled 351 students. I'd like to introduce our coordinator of pupil services, Abigail Coatzen.
Thank you. During the 2021 school year, while students were in distance learning, data regarding students to services was still collected. There were a total of 5 suspensions and no expulsions. Despite not physically being in school, students were still accountable to school rules. Unfortunately, we did have students do things while in class virtually, which were serious enough to warrant a suspension. Last year, students' attendance was reported to reflect whether a student attended and was engaged in their virtual class, synchronous instruction. Attendance was also reported in track student participation and completion in their asynchronous work. The attendance rate was 0.05% lower than the previous school year at 95.67%. Change the slide. The slide. And now I'll change it again for Jen. I'd like to introduce Union City Family Center Coordinator Jen Hopkins.
Yeah. This year proved to be challenging for our students and families directly and indirectly affected by the pandemic. As you can see, the Union City Family Center quickly adjusted service delivery to safely meet the needs of our students and families to drive-through distributions, virtual check-ins, programmings, and workshops, home visits, in-person appointments for the COVID pantry, and other urgent living needs, and in-person visits, appointments to teach students and families how to log into Chromebooks to access their curriculum and assignments, which would lead to one of the district's first learning pods housed at the Family Center. When time permits, please check out our UCFC and learning pod videos linked on this slide. Much gratitude and appreciation to our family services assistants, partners, and NHUSD staff who volunteered this past year. Thank you so much for your time. Next is Grace Kim, Director of Alternative Education.
Good evening. Dakota School for Independent Study is the alternative school of choice in New Haven and is composed of our traditional independent study program and a personalized learning academy, which is our virtual learning program. Last year, we served approximately 158 students in traditional independent study and 351 TK students in PLA. Dakota School is in comprehensive school improvement due to our graduation rate being below 68%. Dakota School had a decrease in graduation from 71% to 53% in 2021, and we attribute that to the larger number of seniors who are not in a position to graduate at the start of the school year than in previous years, and less engagement in distance learning due to COVID-19. Activities to support our graduation rate include working with a consultant, professional development, use of a tutor, and additional counselor support. The New Haven Adult School serves our community by providing ESL, adult-based education, and high school diploma classes. Last year, we have 33 high school graduates, and currently we have approximately 325 students. Next, we have Scott Kazani, Chief Academic Officer.
In 2021, the New Haven students took the Scholastic Achievement Test, or the SAT, and the Advanced Placement Test, or AP Test. As college entrance requirements were relaxed in 2021 due to the pandemic, and the SAT was no longer required, there was a substantial drop in the number of students taking the SAT test in 2021 compared to the previous year, from 477 to 96. And while we engaged in distance learning for all of 2020-2021 school year, we were able to administer the exact number of AP tests when compared to the previous year at 1,094 tests administered. In 2021, 719 scored 3 or higher, which was a decline from 720 in 2020. The link at the top of the slide is a report that we received from the College Board, which provides 5 years of student performance data and allows for analysis in a variety of demographic lenses for the SAT and the advanced placement results. California's Department of Education recognized outstanding educational programs and practices in middle and high schools in 2021. This past April, New Haven Unified was notified that James Logan High School was identified as a 2021 California Distinguished School. Congratulations to the staff, the students, the administrative team on bringing this honor and recognition to the New Haven Unified School District. As we all know, 2020-2021 was a school year like no other. Students received instruction during the entire year through distance learning. The Board of Education, in being responsive to these unique conditions, modified the graduation requirements through a temporary suspension of the 2.0 grade point average requirement, as well as a temporary modification to the community service requirement. As you can see, the district four-year cohort graduation rate decreased from 92.16 in 2019-20 to 86.35 in 2020-2021. You can also see that there was a slight increase in the graduation rate at James Logan High School and substantial decreases in the graduation rate at both Connolly Carabella High School as well as the Dakota School for Independent Study. The gold underlying school names are active links to documents that provide additional information and identifies the factors that contributed to last year's graduation rate from each school site. Both Connolly Carabella High School and Dakota School for Independent Study establishing, maintaining, and nurturing student relationships is critical and essential to student success. As students remained in distance learning throughout 2020-2021 school year, this proved to be a significant challenge. Some of the efforts to support and monitor seniors to graduation last year include during the first quarter for transcripts to be analyzed, create graduation plans, and have our family service assistants outreach to families. In quarter two, senior meetings were held, parent information sessions were conducted, senior letters were mailed home, and continued family service assistant outreach was conducted. During quarter three of last year, there was revisiting of the graduation plans with students, individual parent meetings were held, parent information sessions were conducted, and again, continuing with outreach from our family service assistants. And during quarter four, final transcript reviews, determining final grades and next steps were determined for students who did not graduate, and again, working in collaboration with our family service assistants. Root cause analysis and data analysis centered on graduation rates and other data points have been conducted both at Connolly and Dakota School for Independent Study as part of the process in the development of each school's school plan for student achievement for the 2021-2022 school year. These plans will be presented to the board at our November 9th meeting. Also, there was a dramatic increase in the number of students who became fifth-year seniors at the end of last school year. These students are students who did not complete 4 years of high school within 4 years. And at the end of the 2019-2020 school year, there were 36 identified fifth-year seniors. And in 2021, the amount more than tripled to 104 students. We believe that COVID restrictions and distance learning contributed greatly to this increase. Many of our students who need more time to have completed their graduation requirements are continuing with us as a fifth year in order to do so. The New Haven graduate profile was developed from an input from a variety of community groups, excuse me, to specify the cognitive, personal, and interpersonal competencies that students should possess when they graduate from high school. While we worked collectively to build these competencies through each student's experience in New Haven, these competencies describe the outcomes we all work collectively to achieve. We want all of our graduates from New Haven to be culturally competent, to be a collaborator, to be a creative and innovative thinker, to have a resilient mind and healthy body, to be an effective communicator, and to be a critical thinker, and ultimately to be college, career, and life ready. As we move forward together, our district graduate profile guides us to ensure equity, stability, and quality for all students. At this time, I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to thank all of the staff members in the Division of Teaching and Learning. Individually and collectively, they are committed, devoted, and passionate leaders. And I am humbled by their commitment to our students and our staff and to the pursuit of excellence. I'm thankful every day for the opportunity to be able to work with you. And with that, we'll entertain any questions or clarifications that you have.
I think first it might be appropriate to give a round of applause for the Herculean efforts of our staff. So have any questions? Ms. Campbell?
Actually, I did have some questions that I had sent in last minute because this was a lot of reading and I didn't actually finish reading the links until about noon today. So I apologize first of all for sending this last minute question, but you did answer them and I have a response about 406. So I got a response to my questions. I do have a request, if it's not there yet, regarding the dashboard on the chronic absenteeism 2019. I know that the reason we are on the red, and that is because of the strike. Is there an asterisk somewhere that indicates that that's what we're, because if somebody's looking at these reports and that is not there, it looks like we're in the red in 2019, not knowing that there was other reasons that made that happen. So that's my first question. My other question is the 2021 absenteeism is better, I think. I saw that someplace, but I cannot find it the last minute. But did we do something different aside from, I know there was a strike, but aside from comparing to before the strike, is it an improvement? I know it will take time to get back, but I think we're on the 95 percentile plus, and that's good. But are we moving forward, getting better as far as the chronic absenteeism?
Okay, so on the California dashboard, the chronic absenteeism indicator is one, again, that for 2019, our district was identified, the district as a whole as being in red, every school site being in red,
Right.
and every student group at every school site being in red. And again, the 14 days of not attending school had a significant
Right.
impact in terms of that indicator. We did contact the CDE during that time to see if perhaps there could be a connotation or, like you had noted, an asterisk of some kind providing a rationale, and that was not permissible. So we did follow up with them that it is an outcome from that time period that then impacted our chronic absentee indicator. In terms of our ADA, and again, we monitor our ADA on a monthly basis. And correct me if I'm wrong, we're pretty consistent with what the attendance rate was from before we went into the pandemic, around the 95 percentile with some fluctuation month by month, either above or below, and some fluctuations from site to site as well.
All right, good, thank you. And again, thank you for the response to my question regarding graduation rate. And I'm not going to have you repeat what you just said. It's all right here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And the word Herculean is right in this case because this is a lot of work. So I'm really appreciative about all the hard work that we put in making this happen. And I appreciate all the links, even though it took me a while to get through them. It was good to be able to access this without having to go back to you and do that. I am looking forward to future dashboard because it is really frustrating for me anyway to just have the numbers without. It is hard to compare year to year when the comparison does not look, the format is not the same. So I'm looking forward for two future reports on the dashboard. And again, thank you for doing that. And I'm glad that we're doing dashboard rather than the numbers because it really gives us an authentic way of assessing ourselves and improving on what we do. Thank you again.
Thank you. Any other members have questions, comments? Yes.
Thank you for all the material. One of the things I really enjoy about this particular presentation is it allows us to see a wide breadth of the work that you do. You guys touch on a little bit on each thing and allows me as an individual board member to say, hey, you know what, that thing that you mentioned, you gave it to us at a really high level. I want to delve a little bit more deeply into that. One of those, and I've mentioned this in the past to the superintendent, I'd love to learn a little bit more about the multiple tiers of student support because I think that's, I've heard it a few times, but I don't know what it means. I've seen a couple, slides, but that's something that I'd like to learn a little bit more about. So possibly in the future, we can have a deep dive on that. I think that would be really helpful. The second question that I have is around how are we assessing college, career, and life readiness? That is one of those things that I think it could be relatively subjective, and I speak specifically around the way that we handle life skills as a ninth grade curriculum. In my experiences, different teachers have different ways of doing it, and there doesn't seem to be a coherent or cohesive theme for how we're structuring that curriculum. And that's something that we, as the board, should direct in terms of, for example, some teachers, there are some outstanding teachers that I've seen do work on financial literacy, and and others don't. Some bring sex education back to the forefront. So I'm just wondering, is there a how are we assessing that element of our goal, and is there a way that we're looking at standardizing or standardizing the wrong word, but putting a little bit more discipline and rigor behind that curriculum?
And again, we'd be happy to bring some information to you in terms of the curriculum that is being offered through our life skills class. Again, that would take some interface with our staff members to be able to perhaps provide that information to you. But certainly, again, some of the things that you mentioned, such as financial literacy, and again, sex ed being a part of the curriculum, that's a mandate that has to occur in every classroom. We're responsible for ensuring that for all of our students in grade 9 as part of life skills. So we could certainly, based upon the consensus of the board, bring that information back to you early. All right, thank you. You will.
I guess that's me, unless there's anybody else. Okay. I have two questions. One, I really appreciate parent workshops, and I was wondering, what's the attendance like? Are we getting a good crowd?
When we first introduced the synchronous and asynchronous parent workshops as part of the family learning portal, what we found at first was that attendance was sparse. Obviously, in the midst of COVID, it was very difficult to engage. We did some significant outreach for participation depending upon the topic, and it seemed to dramatically increase participation. And so we, regardless of participation, have made arrangements to record and create an archive in the family portal so that if any parent and any community member at any time would like to access any of those synchronous or asynchronous parenting support opportunities, they are available in the portal for anyone's accessibility.
Great, and thank you. And then the other question I have is, we talked about the issues which led to lower graduation rates at Conley, Rayo, and Dakota School. Have you seen an improvement since we returned to in-person instruction?
We do have both the administrators from Dakota as well as from Connolly. Grace is here this evening, and I'm sure she could speak to that on your behalf. Our principal at Connolly, Dana Chavez, is available virtually if you'd like to hear from her as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question about, you had said something about has it improved? I didn't quite understand that question.
So in the report under the graduation rates, if you click on the link to the Dakota Independent School, it said there was a lot of things on there about, hardships related to COVID-19 and people having, students having to take jobs to support their families, students without internet, students who would keep their videos off, stuff like that. That seemed to, that were hardships during COVID-19, especially for, our students who are, more, have less resources. So have we seen an improvement in those numbers since we returned, to in-person instruction, since COVID's let up a little bit? Are we seeing an improvement now?
I can speak for my side. I can't speak for Conley, but I do think that allowing students to come back onto campus have made them feel better and more connected to school. I think one of the things that we noticed last year was because they weren't coming in to actually physically meet with their teachers, there was some sort of disengagement from the students, so they didn't work as hard, to me. I think it has been better because now they're on site. I want to say that the students at my school and at Conley, they're the at-promise students. And so one of the things that really factors into their sets is feeling connected with their teachers and their advisors that we have. And that was lost through at distance learning. And so having them come back, I feel like they're a bit more connected and more motivated to do better. One of the things that I did notice, at least from my side last year, was we always keep track of students who are in a position to graduate for seniors at the beginning of the school year. And last year, we as I was building this some information for this presentation, I noticed that there was quite a number of students who are not in a position to graduate than in previous years. And that was one of the accounts for why we had a lower graduation rate, at least at my site.
Okay, thank you. And we have
Dana's here. Dana, can you hear us?
Yes.
hello. Oh, I'm going to ask you the same question. I don't know if you heard during.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Ms. Kim shared. And I would also like to add that I think having our students have access to wraparound services has made a huge difference. Having them have access to our FSA, having them have access to our wellness center, our full-time counselor, and just having the connectedness that they lacked, so much so for the time that they were doing remote learning. I've seen a huge, and of course I only have the last few months to as my context, but just seeing and getting to know, I know alt ed populations of students quite well. And so I have that framework to bring to the work and to Conley. And so talking with the students and just interacting with them, there just seems to be, they seem to be so much happier just that they are on campus, being able to connect and then having the resources so that if there's something going on, we can immediately get them matched up with someone so they can get some intermediate interventions and support. And that, of course, while we know that there were those resources in place while they were learning remotely, just the depth wasn't there. And the services that are on campus that they would have to, there was much more of an effort that needed to be made in order for those for students to be connected to services. So now with them on campus, being able to connect students immediately, I think has made a huge difference just in the reopening of schools, and having them have that support network there in place has made a huge difference, I think, for their level of connectedness and overall satisfaction, so that we hope will turn into positive results when it comes to graduation and attendance rates.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, well, is there anything else? Yes.
Something related to that. The BSIS graduation rate in 2020 was 71.11%. And then in 2021, it was 52.54, which is a decrease. And we heard the reasons for that. So I'm looking forward to seeing all the intervention that we are putting in place. Next report, I'm sure, I'm almost positive that it is going to be much better. I do have a question. What was the graduation rate before 2020? I don't think I saw that.
Yeah. I don't have that figure at hand to be able to share with you. I'm sure we can, unless yeah.
Oh, okay.
We would need to get you that.
All right. Thank you so much. I was just wondering when they were getting all of the support, there was a change during the.
Again, trustee Canvas, again, through the process of being able to analyze the data and determine the root causes, the action plans of how these school sites are addressing the graduation data, you're actually going to see that next month as part of their school parents.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit restless looking at that right now. Thank you so much for putting up with us.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Is there anything else from the board? Okay, thank you, Mr. Mckelly.
Thank you.
All right, we're moving on to item 8.2. Presentation on Dakota data. And this is also Mr. Kazani.
This presentation is actually going to be in two parts. The first part is going to be our Dakota data dive presentation. And the second part is going to be an update on our district goal number 2 around equity, access, and achievement. And so with that, to start off the first part, I'm going to bring back to the podium John Adams.
Thank you. Okay, so again, good evening, Clerk Mallory, members of the board, Dr. Thompson, my name is John Manos. I am the Director of Digital Services. This Decodo data dive, kind of being a mixture of data and technology, landed squarely in my department. And so I'm happy to kind of share some of the results of that information and share kind of information about the process. I will say we learned a lot about how to pull longitudinal data from this project. It was a good learning experience. And before I go much further, I definitely need to acknowledge the hours and hours and hours of work put in by Jessica Ellenbarr, our coordinator of assessment evaluation. All the numbers that have been crunched by her. And I also want to acknowledge the efforts of Shobha Reddy, our senior program analyst. She helped pull that information down for Ms. Ellenbarr to crunch. So thank you to both of them. This, as I said, is a very challenging project. And one of the reasons why it was so challenging is going back in time, CalPADS, where we got a lot of this data from, would reformat how they presented that data. And so we definitely were not comparing apples to apples. Sometimes we were comparing apples to oranges, and often it felt like we were comparing apples to hammers, just trying to take a format that just did not make sense and shove it into a different format. And so I feel very comfortable that the data that we're presenting tonight is accurate. It represents our best effort. And I'll give you a little bit of an asterisk that it's essentially done by hand. And so it is, I feel very comfortable about it, but I think we got pretty darn close. So we are going to go over a couple of different pieces of information with you tonight. We're going to be looking at our yearly graduation rate, again, for comparing the students from the Dakota area to non-Dakota students. We'll be looking at the A through G completion rate. We'll be looking for elementary and secondary schools, looking at grades, SBAC scores, and NWEA growth scores. We did at the September 14th board meeting share briefly some information related to chronic absenteeism and discipline. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time going over that again, but I did include it in this presentation so that it's all kind of in one place. The first piece of data we're going to take a look at is our yearly graduation rate. And the yearly graduation rate frankly takes the number of seniors on the first day of school and at the last day of school sees how many of those have graduated. It's not it's a good indicator of how things are going. There's another way to look at graduation rate, and that's looking at cohort graduation rate, where they take a snapshot of ninth graders and kind of follow those kids up until senior year. But going back in time and trying to do that longitudinally and doing it by hand, it frankly became unwieldy, and we wouldn't be able to say with too much of a degree of confidence that we had all the kids each year kind of historically to be able to compare. So we did just focus on the yearly graduation rate. And so looking at the yearly graduation rate, you can see that for the most part, the students from Dakota were keeping pace with our non-Dakota peers. And in fact, in 1819, kind of outperformed the district by a point. At the beginning of the pandemic and then continuing through last year, you can start to see the separation between our Dakota students and then our non-Dakota peers. And last year, that difference was significant. And I think that, you can say that remote instruction really was, and this is going to be a thread you're going to see a couple of places in this data, that remote instruction really had a disproportionate effect on our students from that community. That for measures in which they were keeping pace and doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing, hitting that remote instruction really kind of exacerbated, I think, some challenges for folks. The next piece of data that we're going to look at is our A through G completion rate. The A through G completion rate references the courses that students need to take over the course of their high school career in order to meet the minimum admission requirements of CSUs and UCs. So frankly, that's about as much about A through G requirements as I know, but it is a good measure to see, you know, are our kids leaving? High school wasn't my bad. Are they leaving us ready to enter college? So you can see that this is a really mixed bag, right? There are some years in which our students from Dakota significantly outperform their non-Dakota peers, and then there are years which they fell behind, 16, 17 being one. But as I mentioned previously, when we look at 1920 and 2021, that difference is significant. And our students from Dakota fell behind. So again, there are definitely times when the Dakota students outperformed the district, but that remote instruction really tended to be a negative influence, had a negative impact on our students. Switching from graduation rates and whatnot to looking at elementary school, we're going to take a look at our elementary student grades. And our student grades at the elementary level, students receive either a below, approaching, proficient, or mastery, and kind of corresponding to a 1 through 4 number scale. We are looking at the final spring trimester, so we're only looking at the end of the year grades and not necessarily the trimesters before. And although, excuse me, our elementary students get an overall score in reading, writing, and math, we're really going to be focusing on reading and math because that's a thread that's kind of common throughout. So with reading on the left and math on the right, you can see that the students from the Dakota area did not fare as well over time in getting those proficient report card grades, either proficient or mastery. And that happened every year, and in both reading and in math. And again, you can see that where our students were our Dakota students were holding their own and making some gains, the remote instruction in the pandemic definitely did have an impact on them. And another thing just to see is, it was interesting to me, but the proficiency, report card proficiency and reading kind of really matched math each year. So if there was an increase in one, there tended to be an increase in another. If there's a decrease in one, there's a decrease in another, and the other one. And I spoke to that. Okay, elementary SBAC. So in the spring, students in grades 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 11 take the SBAC, the Smarter Balanced Assessment. They take those assessments in both reading and math. Students in grades 5, 8, and 11 also take the assessment in science. We're going to be taking a look at the reading and math and kind of comparing those different performance levels for those students. So for the last 2 years, for 1920, the overall state testing was canceled. Nobody had to do it. Last year, 2021, the SBAC was on the table for districts to give to their students, but districts could also opt to give a district level assessment that they chose that met certain criteria. And we chose to do that. And instead of giving the SBAC to our elementary and middle school students last year, we gave them the NWEA, which Ms. Ellenbarr kind of spoke to, and I'll speak to a little bit later. Again, in both reading and math, our students from the Dakota area were outperformed by our non-Dakota students. It looks as if the difference in proficiency of that SBAC was more pronounced in math as opposed to reading, although there was still a significant gap in reading. Elementary NWEA, I'm glad Ms. Ellenbarr already kind of spoke to this, but again, what happens is students will take a math and a reading assessment in the fall. And based on the millions of students across the country who have taken this test and have scored that same student score, kind of the software and the algorithm will say, for a particular student who scored at this age, who scored this score in the fall, we would expect them, if they're making progress, they would set a goal for them. And so what we are going to be looking at is how many of our kids met that goal. It is important to remember that just because a student meets the goal, it doesn't necessarily mean they're proficient, but they're just making appropriate growth. Students who are below their peers have a larger gap. They have a larger RIT score gap to meet, as opposed to students who are higher. Their target is a little bit shorter. So for NWEA, in terms of meeting their growth targets, our Dakota students and our non-Dakota students, for the most part, you almost can't tell them apart. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. A little over half typically are meeting those goals. We did not give a spring NWEA in 1920, so we could not do that fall to spring comparison. We did give remote NWEA last year, which was a challenge. And you can see that in terms of hitting those growth targets, our students overall did not meet those growth targets. And again, those growth targets are based on kind of going to school every day in classroom with teachers. So the kind of an optimal situation, which our students in remote learning last year did not necessarily have. So again, not as many students met their growth targets, and our students from Dakota, fewer of them compared to their cohort met those goals. Going back up to the big kids. So we're going to be looking at secondary grades. Again, we're going to be looking at the last either quarter with schools like Conley, trimester like our middle schools, or semester like Logan. So whatever the last spring score is, that's what we're going to look at. And we're looking at the percentage of students who passed courses, ABCs, or a P for pass or credit with that 1920 school year. And we're going to be looking at language arts, math, science, and social science. And so again, language arts on the left, math on the right, and these are the percentage of students who passed their courses. And you can see that our Dakota students were outperformed by our non-Dakota students each of the years, although a couple of years it was close. And again, you can see that remote learning really seemed to have a disproportionate impact on our Dakota students. If you take a look at that 1920 for English language arts, you can see that it was the lowest passing grade, which is going to be an outlier compared to the rest of the content areas, because if you look at math on the right, more students than ever passed, and I think that was because we had switched to credit, no credit. Looking at science on the left and social science on the right, unfortunately, that trend stays true, where our Dakota students are not performing as well, or not passing at the rate that their non-Dakota peers are. You can also see that in 1920, for both of those content areas, there was the highest scores, the highest percentage of students passing. And you can see for 2021, for everybody, that seemed to be a struggle. I think I covered that as well. Secondary aspect. Again, this is grades 6 through 8 and 11. With the exception of last year, the only folks to take the SBAC last year were the 11th graders. And that was mostly to assist those students who are going to college, who need a high enough score on that SBAC to kind of waive some remedial courses. But probably one of our biggest disparities in terms of achievement is looking at the state testing. Our Dakota students do not fare as well as our non-Dakota peers. probably even though it's a bigger discrepancy in math. Although the math scores are trending in the right direction, there's still a pretty significant difference. Secondary NWEA. So the folks who take the NWEA at the secondary level are our middle schools, Conley and Dakota. Only very few Logan students take the NWEA, and those are our English learners who use that NWEA score to help in their reclassification process. So for the most part, these are going to be middle schoolers in volume, but also Conley and Dakota. And again, these are the percentage of folks who are meeting that growth target. And again, our Dakota kids are hanging right in there in terms of making growth, in terms of, moving in the right direction over time, as measured by the NWEA. We did not do the assessment, the spring assessment in 1920, so there is no score there. And again, everybody took a hit in remote learning, and in math, it looked like our Dakota students fared worse than the other populations. As I shared, we did speak briefly about chronic absenteeism last year, and again, the chronic absenteeism earlier in September. Chronic absenteeism refers to students who miss 10% or more of the school year, either excused or unexcused. It doesn't matter if you're cutting or if you're sick. 10% for a 180 school day, that's 18 days. And this one looks a little different because we did it first. But in terms of the percentage of students who met that threshold, that chronically absent threshold, you can see that historically, Dakota students have been higher percentage of them have been chronically absent. And starting with 1920 and then even more so in 2021, again, both those kind of lockdown remote learning, the attendance got worse. For our Dakota students. It was a struggle. And I think you can draw a through line between, attendance and achievement and all those other sorts of things. It was I don't know that kind of taking a look at this data, the main reason for it was to see how it impacted the Dakota population. I think we were looking more historically, but what this data has shown us is that area really did, in almost every measure, and they were disproportionately impacted. The discipline we talked about last time. Again, on the chart here, you can see that blue box is about the, in terms of demographics, what percentage of our population do the Dakota students make? And so in 16, 17, they're about 13% of the population. And then it's looking at the discipline, how much of the discipline were they responsible for, or what percentage of them were disciplined. And we would say it would be disproportionate if it was like a big gap between those numbers. And these numbers are pretty close, with the exception of 2021, where we only had like 5 students suspended, and one of them was a student from Dakota, so they became 20% of those suspensions. So the data tables that Ms. Langrar put together can be found on each of these links. They're big. Clear your calendar, spend some time. There's a lot to look at. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Anybody have questions? Member Cameron.
Again, thank you for doing such a huge job and come up with something. I did like your analogy comparing an apple with a hammer, because it seems like it's hard to do the comparison based on the information you were getting. And I know it's hard to get real data, but what testing are we doing moving forward?
So compared to pre-pandemic, it's essentially the same. So NWEA 3 times a year for our little guys up to 8th grade. One thing that we added this year, or we added during the pandemic, was Literally. That took the place of the F&P reading assessment, which was very time consuming to complete, and Literally is much quicker. There are some things that Literally does not do that, a teacher sitting down with the student doing a reading assessment, you'll get more information with that, absolutely. But the
You talk about
Fontaspinal, and so that is something we started last year because we really couldn't figure out, at least in the beginning, how to do F&Ps with Fountains and Pinnell with all our students. And it was our amount of instructional time was so small compared to being in classroom, and doing those assessments takes one-on-one takes a lot of time. And so I think the Literally assessment was a good addition to our assessment complement. So I think it's very well received. And again, if a teacher really wants to dig in and get some additional information, they still can do an F&P and dig in.
And what will the state be doing?
So that is not a measure that the state has any input on, or that is just for our own instructional guidance. The state's looking at Absenteeism.
What about the report cards for the high school? Are we going, I know we use pass and not pass, credit, not credit. Are we back to regular
Yes.
ABC for the?
We were back to regular grades starting at the beginning of this past year. So we did, with the board's permission, we switched for that second semester of last year of 1920. We switched to the credit, no credit, or pass, no pass if you're kind of in high school or middle school.
And of course, with the elementary, we're back to the standard base report card.
Yes, and although we never moved away from the standards-based report card, but we did, our report cards are substantial at the elementary level. They're big, and we worked with representatives from the different grade levels to kind of pare it down what on that report card we were going to fill out. And so all kids got overall grades, all kids got comments. All kids were, graded or assessed on, conduct and 21st century learning skills and whatnot. But this year we're back to what we were pre-pandemic.
I know that you'll be going back to the other types of assessment that gave you numerical numbers. And I can't imagine how you could do a summary of a standard-based report card in the elementary, or do you even try to do that?
So if I'm understanding your question, when we're looking at kind of the numbers that we're kind of putting together to see if they were proficient, we were just, there's tons of pluses and minuses and checks and all these different kind of substandards and whatnot. And we were really looking at overall rates. So teachers definitely, yes, overall reading, overall math.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I saw trustee Gonzalez's hand.
Yes, yeah. I just want to commend you, John and Jessica, for taking on this task. I didn't know until tonight this was solely on you guys, that y'all did it by hand. A lot of time devoted to that, and that explains all the dagger looks you guys were giving me all summer.
Dyer feels strong. Dyer feels strong.
No. And I do have that tie, by the way, the same exact one.
Well, it's because they make it an extra long, so because we need the length of it. So what I'm getting what's a lot of stuff reaffirms what the Dakota community already felt and already experienced, that there is a need there. I would say
looking at the data, the correlation is the pandemics, this virtual learning has been bad for them. You can see it in the data. I'm looking forward to going forward. Now that there's a need, if this continues, if we switch over to virtual, who knows in the future, that they do get more hotspots, that they do get better technology over there, that, because absolutely there's a need over there. So I am definitely hoping on that. Since you guys are in the data, I was wondering perhaps you can look into our IEPs. I was very curious about students with special needs. If you guys can look into that, what is our population? How many IEPs are devoted in that region? That's my ask. So that's it.
So thank you. There's a lot of stuff to go through here, more than we can probably talk about tonight. I just did want to identify just some things that I saw. By and large, when you look at grades, that you see the disparities pretty starkly. When we're comparing an adaptive target like NWA, the gaps definitely normalize a little bit, so that's good news. One, and SBACs also show large disparities. And I assume that we're going to be getting to this next portion, which is okay. Here's this data. Now, what are we going to do about it? That's what I'm assuming that the next presentation is all about. So I'll sit back and wait on that. I did just want to tell you how useful this information is. What I would, and I think Trustee Gonzalez alluded to it, I would assume that since we kind of have this benchmark methodology now, we kind of already know how to slice and dice the data, is this something that we can kind of keep an eye on moving forward so that we can benchmark progress against the data sets that we've actually put together so far for this particular presentation? That's my comment / request.
Yeah, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but I think you'll be pretty happy
All
about that.
right. I'm gonna say thank you so much for doing all this hard work. I really appreciate it. I mean, we kind of knew that Dakota students were more impacted by distance learning than other students, but this really shows it in a very stark way. And, I'm just hoping Ms. Kazani will be giving a great presentation. I hope that we can all work together to decrease the disparities in these numbers going forward. So thank you.
Yeah, if I could add one more thing. One of the things that I would also like to kind of say that, yes, while COVID and distance learning definitely have its impact, and we can see that in the recent data, my feeling is if we go back, I know it's hard to get that type of longitudinal data, if we go back even further, the disparities will probably, my guess is, obviously with that data, is that they will have, they've been there for a while, and that the pandemic and distance learning made the problem worse, but I think there's probably a systemic long-term historical trend that this is just kind of cluey. So.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna move on to goal number 2 with Mr. Kazani.
As you know, our Board of Education adopted 5 district goals, and goal number 2 focuses on equity, access, and achievement, where students will thrive academically and emotionally in a rich, diverse environment that's rooted in equity and supports our social emotional learning. Our action initiatives. Our action initiatives for this goal include ensuring inclusive and equitable access and conditions, developing and implementing multi-tier systems of academic, behavioral, and social emotional support, and coordinating student services relating to school success, attendance, and family stability. So data. I think we presented sufficient data tonight, volumes of data related to our student achievement. But one of the actions that we are undertaking as a result of the data is for us to be able to develop what's called the New Haven Unified Equity Report Card. And as part of this report card, it's intended to collect multiple data points focused on equity that can be evaluated over time and is data that is comparable. And in this way, we can avoid comparing data that's apples and oranges and be able to compare apples to apples. By having comparable data over time, and by creating a tool that's going to help to analyze equity-based patterns and trends, we believe that we're going to be empowered to be able to make data-based informed decisions in implementing our action initiatives to support the district goal number 2. As part of the equity report card, we are looking to include both quantitative data, which we've again have a plethora of sources and business to utilize, but also to include qualitative data, which is sometimes is more difficult to collect, but is just as important in being able to identify patterns and trends within our system. So what we're thinking in this draft of an equity report card for New Haven, first is to look at who would we be looking at. So we would be looking at students through the lens of student demographics, race and ethnicity, being able to look at students through gender identification, special education students, English learners, displaced students, low socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and foster youth. And again, specifically looking at the Dakota area as a systemic collection of data longitudinally, both quantitatively as well as qualitative. And then thinking about what we're going to be looking at as part of this report card. Again, thinking that these would be the domains that we would base our report card within, which we would look at achievement, obviously, student attendance. We would be looking at disciplinary data. Again, making a connection to the 5 district goals, specifically with goal number 3 about employees, is being able to look at our employment information and profiles, being able to look at curriculum in regards to access to grade level instruction using board adopted curriculum, as well as the budget and how parts of our budget support each of our 5 district goals. And so we have already taken some first steps. We did have our first district equity council meeting for this year that was held on October 11th. And we took our initial steps by asking representatives from each school sites to go back to their communities to gather information about what data they would like to be included as part of our district's equity report card. And from that, we've developed a timeline to guide our work over the course of this year. So November 16th, those representatives are planning to come back to the district's equity council meeting to share the information that they've collected in terms of any additional data that we need to consider to be able to include. From November to February, we'll again engage in a process of vetting and reviewing and getting feedback with our engagement groups in terms of the creation of our equity report card. In January, the Equity Council will have a progress report and provide additional feedback. And our goal for this year is by March is to finalize what that report card would look like. And once we finalize the content of the report card, is to generate baseline data for the 2020-2021 school year. And then the Equity Council would review this baseline data at their meeting held on April 26th. And during the month of May, it's going to help us to inform our strategic plan year 2 review with all of you and inform our initial planning for year number 3 going forward. So again, some intentionality around areas and patterns being, again, helping us to inform our decision-making, creating a tool that will empower us to do that. And in this slide presentation, there are 2 additional slides, which I will not review with you tonight, but they are the other action initiatives to support goal number 2 around equity and access that we are planning for the upcoming year. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Kazani. You did a very nice job summarizing kind of where we're going. And I do want to recognize Trustee Gonzalez. The Dakota data request. We were working on this idea of an equity report card as part of our goals. It really helped us wrap our brains around the types of metrics that we can use moving forward. And that data, the data work that was done by Jessica and John is really going to be kind of a framework, as you can see, to move that forward. So it's actually, and it will be one of the indicators from here on and here out. I think it's one of the things when it comes to the Dakota data in particular, I think Trustee Nishihara is right. I think if you look back in time, you'd see some different results. But, this is only my third year in the district, and I have to wonder how much different it was prior to the family center being there. One of the things that's worth looking at is look at what Jen Hopkins and her team did last year to engage our students and families, many of whom live in that Dakota area. If you look at all of the work that was done there, I can only imagine how much worse these outcomes would have been had that not been there. So it's there's a lot of I don't want, when you see the disparity in the results, particularly during the pandemic, what I don't want people to walk away with is the idea that there wasn't a lot of work done to engage that community. And again, I think the results you do see are would have been significantly worse without those efforts. So I do want to thank Marcus and his team at the family and the board, actually the board as well, for allowing that reorganization to happen, where we really positioned student services, family services, the family center, and all of that work right in the Barnard White area. So anyway, you should be, with that, I'll leave it with that. And I'm hoping that you'll see in years to come and expect an annual report where we're tracking both the Dakota progress over time and also all of the other groups that Mr. Kazani mentioned.
Member Campbell?
Yeah, this is a little bit related to that, and you mentioned moving forward, one of the things we will be addressing will be the curriculum. So my question is, I know we started being in person the last few months, but where are we as far as implementation of ethnic studies so that students could see, reflect on their faces on the people and the curriculum that they are seeing?
So we've already, I'll share, I've already started collecting some of the baseline data in that regard. And so what we've already taken a look at are, again, the curriculum that's been adopted that has used the social content filter that is a part of the adoption process, and in which adoptions will that occur. So we're going to learn that information because we'll chronicle it back to all of our adoptions, which again, we have adoptions over a number of years that occurred within the district. Also collecting, for example, samples of literature that's being used in classrooms and whether or not they are authored by people of color, and if the characters are people of color, and that's what, and if so, from what background. We did collect that information already, have that on hand as far as some of the background information. And we will continue again in terms of the curriculum, ensuring that we have access to our board adopted curriculum, again, particularly in language arts and mathematics, which we know the social content curriculum filter has been utilized. And so that's all there. In terms of the ethnic studies, again, as you may know, recent legislation has been passed and mandating that. Again, we have so much to be proud of here in New Haven because we have a well-established ethnic studies department over at Logan. And so many of those mandates that are going to be significant scopes of work for other districts, we're in a very, very strong position in terms of the offering that we have, because not only do we offer the curriculum, it is also a graduation requirement, which are two prongs of the legislation which we just passed.
And that looks good in elementary as well. I know in the high school we're mandated to do certain things, but how does the publication, I know the adoption for language arts and reading was just done 3 years ago here, right? And we're on a 7-year cycle. So hopefully we won't wait another 4 years to start seeing their faces in the textbooks.
So also at the elementary level, as part of the expansion of summer school for K-12, we did again have an initial opportunity for students at Alvarado Elementary School to engage in an equity summer experience. And so while that was again developed by teachers from Alvarado Elementary and for Alvarado Elementary students, it's something that they have indicated maybe something that we may want to consider scalable, leveraging our ESSER funds for summer school in the upcoming year. So there is some exploration around that. It has not yet been developed as a separate and distinctive curriculum that's offered obviously at the elementary level, because again, our classrooms are self-contained and not departmentalized. And so it would be embedded within each teacher's classroom.
Thank you. Along the same line, I know a few years ago, we started the teachers writing history, which is requesting to see the faces of women in our curriculum as well, because if there's a huge discrepancy between what is showing the textbook regarding the accomplishments of men and women in history. Where are we? Because this is like what, 5 years ago, maybe, since we started embarking toward that direction. Where do you know how we're doing in that sense?
So again, from our initial efforts, that's been embedded within classrooms. Again, obviously in the last couple of years, I would imagine through distance learning, I can't speak with full confidence about the current condition. I know it would have been impacted over the last couple of years through the times of our strike, as well as in distance learning as well. Again, all of our curriculum material that is used, you know, that gender is a part of the social content filter that's used. So it is a part of the board adopted curriculum that teachers have access to in all of our classrooms.
All right, so so if I'm hearing it correctly, it's not systemic yet, it's whatever.
Emerging at best.
But are we working toward that direction?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Oh, I'm sorry, one more question. And employment is one of the ways of addressing what we have been discussing. So has the percentage of our certificated changed as far as having the kids' faces reflect in their certificated and classified staff? Is that changing? Or are we moving toward that direction?
That's going to be part of our equity report card coming up that we'll track on an annual basis.
Good enough. Thank you.
Okay, then. Move on. Okay, anybody else? Questions, comments? Trustee Gonzalez.
Thank you, Scott, for your presentation, though, excellent. Just to piggyback off Trustee Conless about the ethnic study, kind of ties in with our ABAR training, though. It's you know, that's what our students need, is just feeling the lessons of history. I personally taught using Our Nation, our social studies fifth grade book, very dry. You know, it's a history of colonization of America. And then I taught, brought in some ABAR literature, which is the People's History of the United States. And it told the real history of Christopher Columbus. And, you know, that's when the students really, was more of a richer discussion, more engaging lesson. So I can encourage us more. I can't say enough about this, that we need to be pushing in that direction. I don't know what the expression is. Say it and I'll forget it. Write it and I'll lose it. But make me feel it, and I will never forget it. So just another push for ethnic studies throughout the district.
Trustee Cameron?
I'm sorry. I just want to remind us when we go through the adoption that whatever the committee is consisting of, that we are actively looking at what we are looking at and make sure that we adopt textbooks that are going to be addressing what we need to be addressing here in New Haven, as Trustee Gonzalez mentioned.
As part of our adoption process, again, that was really spearheaded and engaged in by teachers. And again, our initial processes are to be able to look at the board adopted lists as a reference to begin with. And as Mikey shared tonight, is scale it down to those that we believe meet our best context here in New Haven, and choose those to pilot. And then in the past, again, we've used the social content filter as part of equity council work to be able to engage in that filter, also to be able to provide recommendations for us to consider as well.
Yeah, I think it's just a good message to send publishers that they need to be taking this whole thing seriously, and that districts are not gonna just adopt a textbook for the curriculum for students to be using when they're continuing to be headed a direction that we were not heading to, and sharing part of history of this country with a lot of the missions of people who really took taken part in creating the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members have questions, comments? Okay, I have some questions. So back to the Dakota data, I think on the school's dashboards, the California dashboard, there's been a discrepancy between, you know, like Hillview Crest and Emmanuel as far as math and reading scores, especially reading, for a while before this project was even launched. And so is there something already in place that we're doing to help bridge that gap for those students to increase their reading and math scores?
So a myriad of things are occurring, again, that impact student achievement. So for example, our kids' zone schools, for example, we received a 21st Century grant, and those opportunities in terms of tutoring and extra support are at Cyril's and at Emmanuel. But again, Hillview Crest, even though a New Haven school resides in South Hayward and is not eligible to receive those funds. And so in knowing that, again, leveraging some of the outreach from our family center and being able to ensure that our teachers are engaging again in professional development around universal design for learning. So students that need access to grade level standard curriculum have instruction that's designed again in terms of multiple needs of engagement and those other lenses that we are continuing to develop as well. Again, we have leveraged tutoring services at our school sites, as well as teachers providing opportunities for extended learning opportunities. And again, this summer, we made a substantial investment this past summer, which again, you wouldn't see in any of this data that was presented this evening, to be able to enhance our summer school experience for all of our elementary schools, both from an academic perspective, as well as an engagement perspective as well. Through enrichment. And so again, as part of each school site's root cause analysis, which again, we shared all of this Dakota data with just principals this morning prior to this meeting. It will help to inform their school plans for student achievement so that the leveraging of their resources based on need can be identified by each of our school site councils in the development of the plans, which will be coming to you in November for the upcoming school year.
Okay, thank you. And then you did mention expanding the ethnic studies program that's happening at Alvarado Elementary to more schools. Is there a plan, or is there a plan to make a plan to expand that to all the elementary schools?
So right now it's in its emerging stage. Again, it's been incumbent upon the work of a couple of teachers over there who've really taken the lead for us from the district. They've been very intentional about their work. They have indicated an interest for us to be able to do that. And we plan to engage them in the winter and early spring to determine what that might look like for next summer. So that, in talking with both of those teachers, we do plan to engage with them in the winter time to begin that process of planning.
Okay, and then my last thing is, can we get a copy of the timeline? The report card, you gave a very good timeline, but I didn't see it anywhere in our notes, so
yes,
I'd like to have that. Okay.
No problem. It was, unfortunately, it was in the Equity Council slide deck, and I didn't transpose it into this slide deck, and so we can certainly get that information for you.
Thank you so much. Are there any last questions, comments?
I just want to thank you. I know we asked a lot of questions, but it's because we don't know where we are. And so thank you so much for all your work. You've just done an excellent job, and I want you to know that we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, moving on to 9.1. Public hearing and adoption of resolution number 016 2122, sufficiency of instruction materials for 2021-22. I will now open the public hearing for the K-12 sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials 21-22. Do we have any speakers? Okay. Give you 30 seconds to raise your hand or press star 9. Going once, going twice. So nothing? All right, great. Okay. The public hearing is now closed. May I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 016-2122, 2021-22 K-12 sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials? So moved. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Calderon.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Schwendenmauer.
Aye. That takes us to 10.1. Required quarterly reports regarding complaints filed under the Williams Complaint Procedure 2021-2022, quarter 1. Is there any report?
No, it's just for public information only. There's nothing to report.
There's nothing to report. Wonderful. Item 10.2, New Haven Teachers Association's proposal to begin successor contract negotiations. Do we have any information?
No, it's just another item for just public view.
Sure. Item 10.3, items from the board and superintendent. Who wants to go first? Dr. Thompson? Okay. Trustee Gonzalez.
Yeah, I want to talk about two concerns in our district, and I also have solutions to these concerns. First concern is we have a positive mentor deficit in our community. We need more mentors, more role models in our community. And I want to offer my services as a mentor. I've already talked to the superintendent about this. They're just talking to some of our struggling students. So I'm not an amazing teacher, nor an amazing school board trustee, but I have an amazing story about myself that I want to share with struggling students. You know, my story is I was the lowest student in class with a learning disability who barely spoke a word in class, and I went on to become a teacher who runs the class. And I also went on to be a school board trustee whose word writes school policy and whose collective voice matters and becomes law of the land in our district. So just know that every misbehavior is attention-seeking behavior. And in my case, I was unsuccessful in reading, and so therefore I would be successful in misbehaving. So this is the case of many of our struggling students out there in our district who don't have positive mentors to look for. They'll find negative mentors. So I wish I would have had. Well, I did have people in my community that was looking after me. But our students need mentors right now. This is the time with possibly fights happening at schools. You know, parents and students pick up on that, and so we have to have a better image in our schools. You know, I could easily went down the wrong path, but like I said, there was people in my community in the school districts that were looking after me. So I just want to put a charge out there and really push this to bringing in mentors and talk to our students, talk to those struggling students. And once I start, you know, I definitely want to pull it. There's so many great stories out there of alumni who have great stories and want to talk to our kids. And so I do want to bring that in. Another concern I have in our district is we also have declining enrollment. We need to boost our population. And so I'm doing my part. And a couple weeks ago, I got married, and now my wife's pregnant. So,
That was +1 or 3.
so I bring up all of this because great schools matter. You know, kids grow up in our community attending our schools should have positive experiences, and parents who raise their kids in our community should have positive experience. My kids will attend New Haven schools, like me, like my siblings, cousins, parents, and other family members, because I really believe in this district. I've experienced it. Great things happen in our community. Great people come from our community. My kids will be great anywhere, but they will be particularly great because they attend our schools here. So that concludes my report.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
All right, member Canlis, you get to follow.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could, I've been married for over 45 years, so that's a long time, that's even longer than your own age, probably. All right, I would like to repeat again that October is Filipino American History Month, and I would like to thank the district for putting a resolution recognizing the contributions and roles of the Filipino American in the United States and the history of the United States. I also like to remind us that New Haven has IBC Middle School, which is named after Filipino American in history who was Ellenbarr Cruz worked with Mr. Chavez during the struggle to recognize labor. So it's nice to see that in New Haven we have both groups in the middle school, Mr. Chavez Middle School and Ellenbarr Cruz. They work together during their cause, and now we have them both in our school district. I thought that's so amazing to have them continue to get their names continue in our history here in New Haven. And this is the first district in the country to be naming a school after Filipino Americans. And I think that's really amazing because the Filipino historically have been invisible, so to speak, in our history, and even the discussions in the legislators. They worry about what such and such would think if they did blah blah blah, but nobody ever says, well, what would the Filipino Americans think about this decision? So I think it's good that we finally have the opportunity to recognize them as well, because they are part of our history. And it's good to repeat that this district has an equity council working toward to improve and make sure that all the faces of our students and demographics are also addressed in the same level as everybody else historically and moving forward. I'd like to share that I visited some of our school sites last week with our superintendent, and it's just so much fun, and it feels so good to see the kids in person again at school, happy and being with their friends. Let's face it, I mean, kids go to school, yes, to get education, but they also want to have their friends, and we saw the impact on their mental health when they were not with their friends at school. So it was nice to see the kids, but I'm also excited to be able to see the wellness and health centers in the schools that I visited, because I think that is a proactive way of addressing the mental needs of our students, and it gives them an opportunity to rethink things before they get in situations such as conflicts that are hard to address if that was not there. So I'm hoping that this is something that we will continue in our district systematically, so that I'm hoping that although we probably cannot prove it, that it would decrease or minimize possible suspensions and expulsions someday. So thank you for allowing me to come to the site. I really enjoyed being there, and it was nice to see our students and staff working in person again. Thank you.
Trustee Nishiura, you want to go next?
Yeah, I was actually going to, I was gonna pass and not say anything, but member Gonzalez actually sparked a thought that I've been having for a long time. And it's kind of, it's related to the data that we got today around the disparities in the CODO. And one of the things that always seems kind of obvious to me is around mentorship. And so the issue that I have is some type of scalable mechanism that we could actually do that with, and whether or not that's something that we do in the school district, or whether that's something that already exists out in the community, like in co-curriculars, in youth sports and things like that. I definitely think it's a game changer for sure. I just don't know how to do it, and so that's, you know, it would be great to get data on the data that shows the effect that our athletics and other co-curricular activities have on changing the trajectory on a lot of the youth that we're talking about today. So that's that missing piece that I think that we have that we don't have. I'd love to delve a little bit more into that and turn that into a goal, possibly in the future, around how we can get behind that in a scalable way. I'm already mentoring, well, I have mentored quite a few New Haven youth, and it's very, very fulfilling. But I'm only one person, and you know the person to mentor ratio is we have to find a way to make that scalable. But I want to commend and really stand behind your observation, and I'd love to see if there's something that we can do about that. But, that's all I had. I wasn't planning on saying any of that, but Trustee Gonzalez inspired me. So thank you.
Let's go with member Calderon next.
Thank you. And all three board members, Mr. Shakira, Gonzalez, and Towers had spoke on the mentoring, the ethnic backgrounds, CCMS and IBC, and I'm lucky. I get to go to local, which has both within our district, you know, from students coming from both middle schools and our inter-district transfers from different areas of the Bay Area, you know, different things like that. Wow, a lot has been said tonight. One thing that I wanted to talk about that have come up in one of the presentations is the language census. We had 50 languages being represented. I think, was it within our whole district, if I'm not mistaken? I think that's very unique. I think not a lot of places can say that, but again, not only is our district, but our community here in the city, I think myself being born and raised all throughout this area, we're very unique. So I'm glad that I now get to be able to help represent, you know, my peers at Logan and hear all of the piles and piles of information that come within our district. Another thing to kind of, you know, piggyback on what was mentioned, I have a student initiative committee at Logan. It's about 40 members of just proactive students at Logan who want to help kind of, you know, make a change and talk about different things that not a lot of people would like to talk about, you know, but it's needed to be talked about. And one thing that we are prepping right now after a few meetings with, you know, the subcommittee chairs and talking with a few different clubs at Logan from different ethnic background, you know, clubs to just awareness, mental health, sexual harassment, sexual assault clubs. It's been quite informative. And what we are planning on doing, hopefully, after meeting with a few more people like the wellness spaces, like special services at Logan, the Diversity of Access Health Center, is to send out a questionnaire to our students, just kind of asking, you know, what do you need? What what do you need that you feel you've expressed that you feel hasn't been acknowledged, just to kind of, as students, we want to understand, well, what are they going through that we're not aware of? What can we do to help? You know, sitting in a class, especially, you know, with the circumstances now, it's not the easiest to build connections, to understand one another, especially coming from last year, visiting, that was a conversation I know that happened with many teachers and many students is, well, we don't feel connected to class. We really have no time besides anything but the curriculum. I don't know their name. I don't know what they look like because their Zoom camera's off. And now we come back and it's kind of still the same thing of, well, it's kind of hard to see you with a mask on, but I don't want, you know, to say, oh, well, can I see, you know, without a mask on, you know? And so it's just things like that that I've heard from a bunch of students, and that's why I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, what the questionnaire can be talked about, or we're also going to be working with admin to get that going, get questions finalized, adjusted with the way that we format all that stuff. So, yeah, homecoming, I just want to throw out there, many people have asked about homecoming. I know last meeting I had mentioned homecoming part of my report. It is happening, so thank you to whoever within our district and our administration at Logan had made that possible. And our activities commissioners and the rest of our team, you know, the leadership class. The Spirit Week will be on the 25th to the 29th. And then we will have a rally during the school day, which is typically we do. That night, we play Bishop O'Dowd for a homecoming game, which is also senior night for our football players. And then on top of that, the dance will take place the next day from 7 to 10 p.m., which will be on the football turf. So that'll be a nice morning of prepping. Hopefully that doesn't rain. So it doesn't rain on that day with the way weather has been looking. I'm sure everyone's kind of aware of a program or a club I'm doing at Logan Soul to Soul. I just wanted to say on behalf of my team, thank you to everyone that has donated, that is supporting us, continuing to support us. It's quite amazing to see what can happen when you just publicize and you put things out there and welcome whatever it is they're willing to donate. So it's great to see. And then also we have officially set up a bin in the main office at James Logan. So anyone in the community can come and bring shoes, not just staff, not just, you know, students or families of Logan. It's open to anyone. And on top of that, we are looking at doing a big shoe drive with a lot of our sports teams, which hopefully we can get sometime soon. But of course, we have to let all this homecoming stuff kind of get finalized and get in the works first. On October 27th, which I'm very excited for, and thank you, Ms. Valdez, I will be attending the California School Board Association Student Member Training over Zoom. So I'm looking forward to seeing the different things I can learn about how to be a better student board member, and just in general learning about all the stuff that comes with it, besides the piles of information. And lastly, it has not been easy. That's been talked about all night with the different things that have been presented to us. But I'm proud to say that not only has our district made it through so much this year as a start, but at Logan, we actually, I believe it was October 8th was our quarter mark off. So I'm proud to see that we have made it through. So thank you to the staff, the administrators, our district, our families, and of course the students that have adapted and supported one another, especially because we didn't have the easiest of starts to the year after not having the easiest end of last week. So I'm excited to see what next quarter looks like, and hopefully my finals go well, because I'm already stressing about that. So thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'll go and then let Dr. Thompson finish this off. Okay, so it is LGBTQ plus History Month for all of October, and I want to thank the staff for getting a resolution recognizing LGBTQ History Month on the agenda tonight. Please vote yes. We just had National Coming Out Day on October 11th. And that's a very important day for many LGBTQ plus people and especially youth. And I just want to say, we've been talking about mentorship, and as an LGBTQ plus person, any student can reach out to me for mentorship, for advice, for support, if they don't have an adult in their lives that's supportive or for any other reason. Because it's very hard to come out. There's a lot of stuff that's very scary, and not everybody's out of the closet. So Harvey Milk, who was the first openly gay elected official in California on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, always said that if you can be out, to be out as possible so that others will see you and they'll come out too. And, that's how the movement for LGBTQ plus rights has really gained momentum. So I just wanted to take some time to recognize that and to commend Trustee Gonzalez's suggestion of mentorship, because it's very important. And I think especially for our students, who are scoring lower on test results and all of these things, that's a very important thing that can make their education much better. So thank you. Dr. Thompson.
Okay, I've got a few things. I'll cover them quickly. First, on last Friday was when the governor's vaccination mandate kicked in for our employees. As of today, we have about 1,400 people that are subjected to that, and I think we're slightly below 80 that are. We have 80 that haven't shown vaccination status but are going through the testing protocol. So that's pretty good. And let's see, moving on. Here, supply chain. You've seen the ships lined up on the news out in the bay, and it's affected us. We were supposed to have Promethean boards, the boards that we had here in our classrooms by the start of the year. It looks like we'll have them in by the first of the new calendar year, which is good. So it's starting to loosen up a little bit for us, but it's really hit somewhat like it's hitting our food services department pretty significantly too. So everything is every product that we get is being impacted in one way or another by the supply chain issues. But at least we'll have our Promethean boards back in by semester late, but coming. So that's good news there. Let's see. Rainy days. Rainy days are always a challenge for schools. When you have COVID on top of it, there's added challenges. So all of our schools have been planning for this for quite some time, and you'll see kids eating outside under eaves and different things and spacing in ways that we've never done before. It's going to be an interesting challenge, but I think our schools are ready for it. And I really hope it doesn't put a damper on some of the really fun things, like we have Spirit Week at our middle school this week. We have homecoming coming up. We have Halloween or fall events at all of our schools. So I'm hoping that this much needed rain doesn't wash that out. Anyway, that's that. But a lot of those things are happening on our sites. Let's see. Lastly, we have our first President's Council meeting this Thursday, and that's a meeting where presidents from school groups like School Site Council, PTCs, PTAs, ELAC are all invited to join me, where we meet and we go over. I provide them with information. I gather information from them, and we put that on pause last year because it was difficult to get any of those committees up and running in a way that. It was lots of challenges last year. We had an advisory council last year, but happy to say that that's back. And as someone, along with Ms. Heldman, who's in charge of making sure our school finances we're solvent. Trustee Gonzalez, I want to thank you for you doing your part, keeping our students coming in, and I'd like to congratulate you on both your marriage and your coming, the child coming along. So congratulations.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're moving on to section 11, committee reports. First, we would have a report from the Budget and Finance Committee. Do we have a report?
We haven't had our meeting yet. It would be on November 15th.
November 15th?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, next would be the report from the Communication and Advocacy Committee. I'll let you take that away, Member Shear.
Yeah, so this will be pretty short and sweet. We reviewed designs for the new website ecosystem, and we started to discuss the communication, where we are on the communication plans for 21-22. And we will, at our next communication and advocacy meeting, talk about different project management tools that we can use to track the work. That's the very stuff that we're talking about, and I don't have our next meeting date at my fingertips, but we are meeting, I believe, in 2 Thursdays. That sounds probably. 28.
Right, the next is the policy review committee. Anything to say?
Well, just that our meeting's on October 26th, on that Tuesday, correct?
Yes. We did not meet since the last board meeting, but we did, at least I did some work on our transgender policy, which was sent to the board members today for review and comment ahead of our policy committee meeting, which will be on the 26th. So thank you to the staff that worked on that, and we will be reviewing them on the 26th. So please give your comments before then. And then the next committee is other committees. Any other committees? I attended the MPROP meeting, which was very nice to see. I have not been to one yet, so I'm the alternate. And it was pretty much like one of our meetings, a lot of, approval of contracts and so forth. But there was some good news that just like the school districts are receiving a little bit more money this year, so is the RP. So that's all I have to say about it. Anything else? Okay. All right, we're on to action items. Item 12.1 is resolution number 017-2122, Native American Heritage Month. Can I have someone read this, please?
I'll read this one.
Okay.
New Haven Unified School District Resolution 017-2122, Native American Heritage Month, November 2021. Whereas Native Americans are descendants of the original indigenous inhabitants of what is now the United States. And whereas the Native Americans were the first stewards of our environment, contributed to the unique identity of California, represented the early voices for the values that define our nation, and whereas prior to the European colonization of the Americas, the indigenous people of California thrived with a vibrant culture and society, and whereas Native Americans were the first human inhabitants of the land that is now Alameda County, and their culture is richly interwoven with Alameda County's diverse social fabric. And whereas the Ohlone Chochenyo people inhabited the lands from the San Francisco Bay to the lower Salinas Valley, including what is now Union City, and whereas Native Americans continue to contribute immeasurably to our history, diversity, economy, and culture by distinguishing themselves as academics, entrepreneurs, and leaders. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the New Haven Unified School District Board of Education recognizes and celebrates November 2021 as Native American Heritage Month and encourages our communities to participate in appropriate observances with activities that celebrate and commemorate Native Americans as a symbol of hope and courage to all citizens. And be it further resolved that the New Haven Unified School District will work to support academic growth and cultural pride of Native American students in our district and county. Passed and adopted this 19th day of October 2021.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 017-2122, Native American Heritage Month?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Calhoun.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Schwenthaler.
Aye. Next is item 12.2, resolution number 018-2122, Seek American Awareness and Appreciation Month. Do I have a volunteer to read this resolution? Member Cameras, thank you.
Resolution number 018-2122, Seek American Awareness and Appreciation Month, November 2021. Whereas California and our nation are enriched by the unparalleled diversity of our residents. Whereas among this unprecedented diversity in California, there resides Americans of Sikh origins whose population comprises nearly 40% of the nation's estimated Sikh population. And whereas Sikh immigrants have resided in California for more than a century, with the first 6 immigrants having labored on railroad construction projects, in lumber mills, and in the agriculture heartlands of Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Imperial Valleys. And whereas while Sikh Americans have distinguished themselves in numerous areas of endeavor, they have demonstrated particular success in the area of agriculture, trucking, medicine, and in the creation of small family-owned businesses. And whereas Sikh Americans have served as members of Congress, mayors, judges, city council members, school board members, soldiers, and scientists. And whereas the Sikh and Punjabi American communities of California continue to make important contributions to our state and nation. And whereas Sikhs and Sikh Americans have made important contributions to the social, economic, political, and cultural fabric of the New Haven Unified School District, Union City, California, and United States of America. And whereas the faithful service of the Sikhs and Sikh American community of this district, city, state, and country merits appreciation as an integral thread in the fabric of American plurality. Be it resolved today, the New Haven Unified School District Board of Education seek to recognize the diversity of its community and afford all members the opportunity to better understand, recognize, and appreciate the rich history and shared experiences of Sikhs and Sikh Americans. And now therefore be it resolved that the New Haven Unified School District recognizes November 2021 as Sikh American Awareness and Appreciation Month, as adopted this 19th of October 2021 by the following vote.
Thank you. May I have a motion and second to adopt resolution number 018-2122, Seek American Awareness and Appreciation Month, November 2021.
So
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Calderon,
Aye.
Camus,
aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Ishikara,
Aye.
Twin Mallory.
Aye. The next item is item 12.3, resolution 019-2122, LGBTQ plus History Month. Member Calderon, do you want to read this one?
Resolution number 019-2122, LGBTQ plus History Month, November 2021. Whereas Rodney Wilson, a high school teacher from St. Louis, founded the first LGBT History Month in 1994 to celebrate and teach lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender LGBT history, now known as LGBTQ+, and whereas October is a significant month in LGBTQ+ history, the National Coming Out Day on October 11th, and the first and second national marches on Washington for lesbian and gay rights in October of 1979 and 1987 respectively, and whereas the LGBTQ+ community has contributed to advancing civil rights in the United States and globally. As exemplified by Bayard Rustin, an openly gay African-American man who was active for decades in the civil rights and peace movements, risked his life for anti-racist protests, and worked as an organizer and strategist with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And whereas the history of national LGBTQ+ rights also was catalyzed by the Stonewall Uprising on June 28, 1969 in New York City, in response to police harassment and discrimination led by transgender activist Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, who also created a trans right group and maintained a place to refugee for LGBTQ+ homeless youth. And whereas the New Haven Unified School District remains committed to its mission of providing equitable student learning and achievement, academic excellence, and workforce development by delivering high-quality educational programs and support services to a diverse community, which includes the LGBTQ+ community. And now therefore be it resolved that the New Haven Unified School District Board of Education hereby honors a diverse and intersectional, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, two-spirit, pansexual, asexual, intersex, non-binary, and queer community, and reaffirms our commitment to creating an environment in which all individuals are supported and neutered. And be it further resolved that the New Haven Unified School District recognized November 2021 as LGBTQ+ History Month, passed and adopted this day, 19th day of October 2021.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 019-2122, LGBTQ+ History Month?
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to know that October is LGBTQ+ History Month. Can we change that in the resolution? Thank you. So I guess I move that we approve it as amended. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Calderon.
Aye.
Camus.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Swift Mallory.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to item 12.2, consideration of student expulsion recommendations in compliance with Ed Code Section 48918C, one case. May I have a motion in a second to expel student number 1?
So moved.
Second.
Do we have any discussion?
12.4. Not 12.2, right?
12.4. Yes. Thanks. Okay, seeing no further discussion, roll call please.
Camus.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Swift Mallory.
Aye. The board now directs the superintendent to take appropriate next steps and ensure that the student completes the board's rehabilitation plan prior to reentry. Item number 12.5, approval of memorandum of understanding with CDPH K through 12 school laboratories. Okay. May I have a motion and a second to approve this MOU?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call please.
Calderon.
Aye.
Camus.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Swift Mallory.
Aye. Item 12.6 is memorandum of understanding with the New Haven Teachers Association. May I have a motion and a second to approve the MOU with NHTA?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion or questions? Roll call please.
Calderon.
Aye.
Camus.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Swift Mallory.
Aye. Item 12.7, ratification of memorandum of understanding with Cal Pass Plus for 2021-2022. May I have a motion and a second to ratify the memorandum of understanding with Cal Pass Plus for 2021-2022?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Roll call please.
Calderon.
Aye.
Camus.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Swift Mallory.
Aye. Next item 12.8 is approval of 2021 elementary and secondary school emergency relief ESSER 3 fund expenditure plan. May I have a motion and a second to approve the ESSER 3 expenditure plan?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call please.
Calderon.
Aye.
Camus.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Swift Mallory.
Aye. We are now on to our consent agenda, which is section 13. Are there any items on which trustees have questions or need clarification or would like to hold for a separate vote? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items 13.1 through 13.7?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Roll call please.
Calderon.
Aye.
Camus.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Aye. There will be nothing for section 14 since we did not remove any items from the consent agenda. We are now on section 15, item 15.1, assessment of governance procedures and protocols. Anything?
Thank you for doing such a great job.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to 16.1, board member requests. Do we have any board member requests?
As I mentioned during the presentations, I would love at some point in the future, doesn't have to be super timely, a deep dive into MTSS, as well as a view at our on our life skills curriculum and understanding how we're making sure that there's some type of structure rigor to that.
Consensus? Yes. Yes, everybody's nodding their head. I missed up. Do you want to give an update on standing items before we go any further?
Let's see, I should have pulled them up in front of me. I know we have the traffic analysis. I'm just waiting for the final moments to be finalized there. What else do we have that's outstanding? Stated the code data was that, so traffic and for the two that are. I think that's it. So you should have the traffic data by the end of the week.
Any more requests from the board? Trustee Gonzalez?
But just, I kind of mentioned it before about the, we include one of the criteria or categories, and I'm gonna ask through the chair or through Superintendent to John. If you can look at the special education population student, the overrepresentation, the claimed overrepresentation of special needs in that particular region.
Do we have consensus? I'm not even.
I think that should be.
That is consensus.
Yeah. Okay.
Any more requests? I see none. Okay. This meeting is now adjourned.
I thought I heard rain while we were sitting here, and I was like, let me go look out the window. Midnight, what's the forecast? Midnight. It's gonna go until midnight? Yeah.
Well, you probably remember rain from when you were a young child back in the day. It's been about that long since we've had it.